Hello, my beautiful friend. So, second video for me tonight. I wanted to keep talking about honoring the ancestors. I'm doing like a book review as you go kind of a thing. So, I finished chapter 1, which was all about who your ancestors are. Um, and I would say by the end of the chapter, I think she's just trying to be very open about who you can consider your ancestors. And so, um, I'm cool with that. That's fine. I try to remember who the audience is for a book like this, right? And so a book like this is really meant for somebody who's new in the spiritual pathways that look at ancestral veneration, right? So like if you're someone like me who has honored ancestors since birth, like some of the stuff in here isn't going to resonate just because you already have an established way of doing things. I would say over time my way of venerating ancestors has changed, but it started with my mother who always honored, family that had passed and was very interested in her Celtic heritage and stuff like that. So it's always been part of my life. But I did think it was interesting, like, who you like if you're adopted or if you don't know, like if you don't know who your father is and you don't know who their family is, like, it's hard to venerate ancestors you don't know about, right? So I think it was interesting. This chapter was interesting. Chapter 2 is about healing ancestral trauma. So if you watched my previous video about this book, you know that I was a little unsure about what I think about ancestral trauma, and I will still say, and I will maintain, that I don't believe it's anybody's job in this lifetime to heal ancestral trauma from the past. It's not our job. We have enough in this life to take care of. However, I would say that I think it is an interesting concept to forgive if that ancestral trauma does impact you in this lifetime, right? And so, for example, my family, both my biological father and my biological mother, they both came, our families came over here in the early 1900s, 1920s, right? So my family wasn't here for the horrible things that happened to the native people of this land. They weren't here for the awful things that happened to the people that they brought over and enslaved. Our families weren't here for that. However, your family might be, right? Nathaniel Hawthorne, his grandfather was one of the judges for the Salem witch trials, and he was horrified by what his grandfather did, right? So I feel like if in your lifetime that trauma is coming through and impacting your life, then there is healing that needs to be done. And I think maybe the reason I'm so cavalier in my thinking about it is that I don't feel that there's anybody I need to forgive in the history of my family. So I don't know much about my biological father's family, but my mother's family came here because they were going to be sent to the workhouse, because my great grandfather had a whole other family. He had 14 children with his first wife, and she died in childbirth. And then he married my great grandmother, who had gotten in trouble and had a child. And then, but she was 20 years younger than him. And so when he died, they were just working class, lower working class. When he died, there was like no money. And back then in Victorian England, like you're sent to a workhouse, a poorhouse, workhouse. And those conditions were absolutely horrible. So one of her stepsons sponsored her to come over to this country. So, so I think, when I look at sort of like our family history, like the recent histories of the recent generations, we're very working class. I'm the only person who went to college. I'm not talking about moving forward with my nieces and my children and stuff. But I was the first person to go to college. I was the first female to graduate high school, I think. I don't think my aunts graduated high school. My mother's aunts graduated high school. My mother did not. So like, I think that the opportunities that I've had allowed me to sort of surpass that trauma. So I never really thought about it as trauma. But I've always I've always worked really hard, and I've always been really focused. I would say though that like my grandmother was beautiful. She was a beautiful, stunning woman, tiny, petite. My mother was very tall, and I thought my mom was beautiful, but she never did. She never thought she had the beauty of her mother. And so in that lineage, like the most important thing you could be was beautiful. You don't want to be smart. You don't want to be smarter than boys. Boys don't want smart girls. Boys want pretty girls. Well, that wasn't a choice for me, I guess. Like it just wasn't a choice for me. And so, like, I remember when I was little, like, my mother could never go out without putting her face on. She had to have her lipstick, and then she had learned that from her mother. And I was like, that's horseshit. If they don't like what I look like, the hell with them. I don't care. It's just, but I don't know that that's ancestral trauma as opposed to psychological trauma. I don't know where the line bleeds there. I'm not a psychologist, so obviously I don't know. But I think that if you come from, if you live in the South and you come from a family that held slaves at one time, you might need to heal that trauma in your life so that you can forgive those people who did that. So I don't want to discount the necessary elements of healing ancestral trauma. I just think for me, I have nothing there to heal really. But some really cool things that she talked about were some rituals. There's a nice ritual in here that you can do. But the other things she talked about was making memorial art of your ancestors, or of things that. And she talks about two things. And one I never heard of before, Stolperstein, which is a stumbling stone, and it's they are small concrete cubes topped with brass plates bearing the name and life and dates of victims of Nazi persecution. They are placed at the last place of residency that was freely chosen by the person before he or she was killed, deported to a concentration camp, committed suicide, or escaped persecution by emigration. There are more than 67,000 Stolperstein laid in 22 countries throughout Europe. That was cool. She talks about the AIDS quilt, which I remember from back when it was first created, and then I've seen it several times when I lived in Washington and then other places. And this other thing, which I thought was super cool, that you talked about, there's a monument called in the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in 2018, so it's relatively new. It was to commemorate lynching victims in the United States, built near a site in Montgomery, Alabama, where enslaved Africans were auctioned to white slave owners. At the center of the memorial hang 805 steel rectangles. They represent the 805 counties in the United States where one or more than 4,300 documented lynchings of African Americans took place between 1877 and 1950. Their names are inscribed on the hanging rectangles, which resemble coffins. To the side lies a set of 805 duplicates of the hanging monuments. These are available to be claimed by each of the named counties so they can be installed there, ideally at one of the sites where a lynching took place. So, art and meaning and healing through art, I love that concept. The Stolperstein, am I saying that right? Stolperstein. I could be saying that wrong. And the lynching memorial art, and if you've been to the Holocaust Memorial in Washington, D.C., these are all amazing ways to honor the lives of people who have had their lives ripped tragically from this earth, and I support that, and I think art does bring healing. So there, ding dings happen all over the place. So the other thing that she talks about in this chapter is the art of dying well, and really thinking about your death and getting everything put in order. Getting we all are going to die. That was the gist of the section, and that. So take care of the things that you need to take care of, and don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to make your wishes known and stuff like that. It makes it easier for those that are left behind. So I thought that chapter was really good, and I do there's questions at the end of each journal prompts at the end of each section, and you can work through them if there's things that you need to forgive or whatever. Chapter 3 is about building your ancestral altar, and she talks about her first ancestral altar and like how altars are diverse because people live in diverse kinds of housing, and could have a portable one, you can have a big one, and then and I do like she has a note of caution here, and I like this because this made me like this book a billion times better. She said she started reading about witchcraft and pagan spirituality when she was very young, 8 or 9. She read every book she could get her hands on, and then they got internet access in their home. She must be young, because I didn't get internet access until I was in my 20s. And all the books and websites I read were very clear about one thing. The first step in doing magic was buying stuff. You had to buy a ritual knife, called an, I have no idea how to say that. To do witchcraft, you had to buy a chalice to do magic, a pentacle, a wand. And according to these books, you had to buy so many things. And I believed the books, so I saved up my allowance and I bought those things, and I only to never use them. And she goes on, and she's like, as we know from Hestra's channel, if you watch her channel, and you should, you're all the magic you need. You don't need to buy anything. You don't need to buy anything. So she's talking about the ritual altar. You don't need to buy anything. You can have things that bring you meaning. You can have fire, you can have water, you can have the things that, represent air and earth. You can have cloth, you can have, holy images, you can have images of your family. You can do all kinds of things, but at the bottom line is you don't have to buy anything. Work with the things you have. I love upcycling. I like reusing things. So I thought that was really good advice. And she talks about all the different things that you can put on your altar, and then how you can work with your altar and clean it, and putting lights on it. You can consecrate it, and then she's got some really nice journal prompts at the end. I like this chapter. So I will say, Hester was like, you already decided what you think about this book. No. I'm always hesitant of things that are too woo-woo, because I'm an academic. But I will say that I do think so far, from what I've gotten through so far, there is a lot of really good and useful information so far in here. And like I said, I think the healing trauma doesn't resonate with me because I just don't feel that there's ancestral trauma that I personally need to heal. So perhaps I cannot connect with that. But I think that it does provide meaning for others, especially others who have much more, I don't want to say colorful ancestors. Like my ancestors, at least the recent ones, were pretty straightforward, boring. And as far back as I can go, through Ancestry.com and 23andMe, there's, nothing exciting there. We're not I'm not Cleopatra. I'm not the reincarnation of, Mary, Queen of Scots or anything. So I think that just doesn't resonate with me, and so perhaps I can't appreciate it as much as somebody who has more in their past to heal from. So, and I think it's important to support other people on their path. So if there are people who do need to heal from ancestral trauma, I would say she gives some really good suggestions on how to do it. I do like the ideas of especially creating art. I'm not artistic. We know this if you watch the channel. I suck at arts and crafts. But I do feel like I want to put together like some kind of thing with pictures of my ancestors, to remember them, to the pictures that I have. I don't have many of my family because the internet wasn't a thing back then, and nobody ever took pictures. We weren't wealthy. We didn't have money for film and stuff like that. So there aren't a lot of pictures, but I think it's worthwhile to create something that will help me remember them through art. So the book is going well. I will keep you posted as I keep reading, and I am wishing you all the best in light and love. Be well, take care, bye-bye.